So I'm Brian D'Ambrosio, and I'm here with my new book, Montana Entertainers, Famous and Almost Forgotten. And I just wanted to read you a little snippet from the back cover where we start. This book is about marquee Montanans. And everyone knows Gary Cooper, they know Myrna Loy, but for every Gary Cooper and Myrna Loy, there are 10 Olva Pippis, Ian McDonald's, or Stanley Anderson. So this book is about the famous end as far as Montana's contribution to the performing arts, as well as the forgotten end of Montana's contributions to the performing arts. So I'm going to read you a little bit from the back. Treasure State stars Gary Cooper and Myrna Loy found unparalleled success during the golden age of Hollywood. For more than a century, Montana has supplied a rich vein of entertainment and personality, from daredevils to dancers and even mimes. Born in Miles City in 1895, comedian Gilbert Pee Wee Holmes played sidekick to such stars as Tom Mix. One-time Butte resident Julian Eltinge went on to become America's first famous female impersonator. There was Taylor Gordon, whose golden voice propelled the son of a slave from White Sulphur Springs to Harlem Renaissance fame. From the little-known Robyn Adair to the ever-popular Michelle Williams, author Brian D'Ambrosio marks Big Sky Country's long-standing connections with America's performing arts. So we wanted to share with you maybe a couple of the stories that are inside. Actually, it's kind of interesting if you get a look at the cover. We have Shane Klaus, who's a musician in Missoula who also owns the Pink Grizzly, and Walter Coy is an actor who was born and raised in Great Falls. And there's Julian Eltinge, who I'd mentioned, who became America's preeminent female impersonator. In fact, he was born Michael Dalton in Massachusetts, and his family moved to Butte, and he actually got the name Julian Eltinge from one of his classmates. And Julian had a long-standing career as an impersonator. And this is Mary McLean, who was an author who ended up taking her story and adapting it to the big screen in 1918, although no copy of that film exists. Monty Montana, who was an entertainer and a roper and a stuntman and a movie star, and an actor named Chief Many Treaties, who starred in a couple movies in Hollywood in the 30s and 40s. So there's famous, like I said, and there's forgotten, and there's kind of runs the gamut of all in between. So as I was mentioning too, was one of the more interesting characters in the book is Julian Eltinge, and I was going to read you just a little bit about Julian. And there's a great quote. "Women went into ecstasy about him," the comedian W.C. Fields once remarked about Julian Eltinge. Men went into the smoking room. So there he is right there, one-time Butte resident Julian Eltinge. A long-forgotten actor, the thrill of 1900s Broadway and a gender-bender of silent films, drag queen Julian Eltinge was popular in Butte, where he accepted his first theater position as an usher, along with several other lads, at the old John McGuire Opera House at Butte. During a 2-day engagement in Butte, at the height of his popularity, Eltinge noted that he was first bitten by the showbiz bug while he and his friends hung around the Caplice Dance Hall. "My first ambitions to mix in the theatrical game were registered then," acknowledged Eltinge. So he is one of the famous and forgotten, so he's both. In this photo here, there is an actress named Jane Drummond who starred in several movies, including this Joan Crawford film. And Drummond was a little more obscure. Some of the actors and stars were really hard to find much information about. But this is an actress named Jane Drummond. And I'll tell you a little more about Jane. So she was born in Red Lodge in 1916 and died in Bridger, Montana. She appeared in a number of films in the 1940s, most prominently The Fargo Kid, 1940, Women in Hiding, 1940, and The Human Comedy, 1943. And she first appeared on screen in the 1940 Joan Crawford film Suzanne and God, which is where this photo comes from. One of the more famous actors from Montana, obviously, is is a guy named Lane Chandler. Well, Lane Chandler was born Robert Chandler Oakes, and he was a good friend. He was good friends with Gary Cooper. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lane Chandler as well, who coincidentally was billed and heralded as the next Gary Cooper, as were a number of actors who had the look and the screen presence and the personality of Cooper. They were all billed as the next Gary Cooper. But some of the next Gary Coopers were actually from Montana as well. So it has often been speculated that if Gary Cooper hadn't been such an overwhelming sensation, his buddy Lane Chandler would have been the major male star at Paramount Studios. So looking into some information about Lane Chandler, looks like his family ended up in Helena when he was a youngster. His World War I draft registration card on file at the Montana Historical Society lists his permanent address as the YMCA of Helena and his occupation as a truck driver. So he attended college here at Intermountain Union College, which was destroyed in the Great Earthquake of 1935, where he was a guard and tackle on its football team. But it was a summer-fall bus tour with his friend Gary Cooper at Yellowstone National Park that ended up propelling and impelling Chandler to end up in Hollywood. So after his good friend Gary Cooper went, Lane Chandler went and followed him off to Hollywood, where he had a very good career on his own. And here's another actor from Helena as well. His name was Ian McDonald, and he was born Olva Pippi. So Ian got his start at Helena's Little Theater and went on to appear in a number of westerns, and he also appeared in High Noon opposite Gary Cooper. And Ian, aka Olva Pippi, he used to come back to Helena fairly often, even up into the 70s, 80s, and eventually he died of Parkinson's, and he's buried in Bozeman. So this photo is kind of interesting. Everyone sort of would know the iconic image of Charlie Chaplin and the Tramp, and most people would also recognize Charlie Chaplin and Jackie Coogan. But the reason that this photo was in the book was because of this man right here. His name was Thomas Wilson, and Thomas Wilson was born and raised in Helena. He was a boxer. He was also a sailor, and he ended up in Hollywood, where he got his start in blackface roles, smearing burnt cork over his face. And then he ended up in a number of roles, usually opposite comedic teams and comedic duos in Hal Roach films. So there's a wonderful photo, and that's Thomas Wilson right there of Helena, Montana. And just a couple more. We have Ethan Laidlaw was from Butte, and he was a career character actor and a career villain in many, many films. As you could tell right there, he was a stereotypical bad guy and a stereotypical villain. That's Ethan Laidlaw of Butte. This would be Ward Ramsey, a.k.a. John Sitvan, and he was from Helena as well. And it turns out he ended up in Hollywood after he was working at the Montana Club as a bartender. Some of his friends had recommended that he head out to New York City and get into the advertising business because he had a certain distinct look. So at the time, John, as his name was, ended up in several advertisements, and mostly of the rugged outdoor nature brands. So what ends up happening is that it's recommended that John change his name. He changes his name to Ward Ramsey. He ends up eventually falling in with a filmmaking crowd, and they recommend him as the male lead role in several movies, which have long since been forgotten. So he had a short career in Hollywood and a reputation of being a really, really nice person and an easy person to work with, but one who didn't have the skill to survive or succeed in Hollywood. So he ends up at a car dealership in Los Angeles, and he's on the forgotten side. So there's famous, there's forgotten, and I guess there's something kind of in between. There's people who were relatively famous in their day and have been forgotten now. So there's all different genres and subgenres. So Walter Coy was fairly well known in his day for Westerns. He was born and raised in Great Falls. So we've got entertainers, singers, dancers, mimes, and all kinds of men and women who have made contributions to the performing arts in Montana. So I'm going to read you just a little snippet here, and thank you. Some of our connections are still considerably famous, like Gary Cooper and Charlie Pride. Some were full of character and color, yet were never quite famous. Red Lodge-born Jane Drummond claimed a stunning screen presence, yet she never reached the upper echelon of her chosen profession. And others were famous, yet are almost forgotten today, such as Wallace Coburn, 1872 to 1954, northern Montana's original cowboy poet and movie star. Or Pee Wee Holmes, a diminutive silent-era film star who made it from eastern Montana to Hollywood stardom as a slapstick sidekick. Each entertainer serves as a testament to the universality of dreams and the idea that success comes to those who eschew barriers and borders and apply their talents with vigor and excitement. So I'm Brian D'Ambrosio, and the name of the book is Montana Entertainers, Famous and Almost Forgotten. Thank you.